you to please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you. Next item on the agenda is the approval of the agenda. Pleasure of the committee. Motion by Mr. DeMonica, second by Mr. Salvatore. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Those opposed? Motion carries 7-0. All members present. Next item is the student government report, student activities. Good evening.
Hello, my name is Gabrielle Salmon. I'm Vice President of Student Government.
I'm Tona Campbell, and I'm president of the sophomore class.
To begin with our past events, on February 10th we had the blood drive. It was very successful. We were able to collect 52 pints of blood, which helped save 154 lives. The next blood drive will be in April, and we're hoping to surpass our February amount. And then last night we had parent-teacher conferences. Student government members babysat the children of the parents and the teachers, and we also directed parents around the school.
On February 7th through the 14th, the sophomore class had a successful class fundraiser, and we were able, with the help of the rest of the government, to successfully fundraise by selling teddy bears for Valentine's Day. And on March 2nd through April 3rd, we will be running Pennies for Patients, and last year we raised over $6,000 for the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society. And this year, we plan to raise over $10,000 towards the treatment for leukemia and lymphoma patients, and towards finding a cure.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda is the consent agenda. Approval of minutes from regular meeting 2/12/2015. Approval of minutes, executive session 2/12/2015. Pleasure of the committee. Motion by Mr. Fiorillo, second by Mr. Denon. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Those opposed? And that motion carries 7-0. Next item is report out of executive session meeting from 2/26/2015. There were no votes taken at that meeting, and I need a vote to seal the minutes of the executive session. Motion by Mrs. Teal, second by Mr. Fiorillo. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Those opposed? That motion carries 7-0. Next item, superintendent's report. Dr. Thornton.
We have a coaching legend with us tonight. Mr. Campbell, would you please come up and talk about you. Coach Campbell will be in his 41st season this year. Cross country, indoor track, outdoor track, gymnastics, over 600 victories, 40 division titles, many state championships, already in the Coaches Hall of Fame, multiple times Coach of the Year. Tonight is another award, the Men's Series Awards Coach. Tonight I have the 2014 Northeast Exceptional Coach of the Year, Coach Cumberland. Just so you know, for the record, I went to Blackstone Melville, and he was the coach when I ran in Blackstone back in the early 80s, and Cumberland was fantastic back at that time. So
He was my coach too.
Thank you very much. Coaching is my hobby, and I love the kids, and several receiving athletes are here tonight. I especially have to thank my wife who puts up with all my traveling and days of joining me to stuff, so thank you very much.
Thank you.
And next up, we have the Toys for Tots presentation. Gentlemen.
Good evening. I'm Colonel Jeff Richardson, United States Marine Corps retired. I'm an instructor at the JRTC unit, Tucker around. We just opened that up at Cumberland High School in September. And helping me out today is Major Russ Wright. He is an instructor who just started, retired recently, and just started teaching in Boston, Massachusetts at a school there. And the first award I'd like to present is to the school superintendent, Dr. Philip Norton. The second award we'd like to present to the Cumberland High School principal, Mr. Alan Tenero. Not here today? Okay. The next award this is the United States Marine Corps Reserve Commander's Award. Proud to recognize B.F. Norton School, representative. Next Toys for Tot award goes to Garvin Memorial School. And the next United States Marine Corps Reserve Toys for Tot award goes to Dr. J. Masterson at Court Middle School. And the last award goes to the Court Middle School. I'd just like to take this opportunity for your help supporting the Toys for Tot program. It's one of those where we have a lot of United States Marines that will give out some toys, and we appreciate the help and be able to spread that unique function for us out among the public in the Rhode Island area. So again, thank you.
Thank you.
I just have two more quick items if I could. First, I'd like to just thank the mayor personally for helping out in the storms this past couple of weeks. We had some snow recently, as you know, and in one of the storms we had kind of a narrow driveway in the back, and through the mayor's help and the highway folks and Frank Stoic, we were able to widen that path. It was really appreciated. Secondly, we had another dilemma. With the last storm, we had some snow drifts, some pretty high ones. Our vendor took care of all of them but one. One snow drift was 12 feet high, around 8 feet long, on top of the high school, and the fire trucks came out and they knocked it down to a nice little level. So once again, thank you. Appreciate it.
Next item on the agenda is chairperson's report. Before Mr. Kenwood dashes off, I just want to say, congratulations to you. Wonderful achievement. Having had a bunch of little kids running around the monastery and meeting your track kids was great. They were completely in awe of them, and your kindness and spirit and generosity in talking to the students is really wonderfully appreciated. So thank you for all that you've done. Next item is reports of standing committees, payment of bills.
Madam Chair, there were no bills presented for payment.
Terrific, thank you. And fiscal management subcommittee update.
Madam Chair, we did meet on Tuesday night. There was a few items on the agenda that were withdrawn, but part of this, Mr. Pignano gave us an update on the natural gas and electricity RFP proposal. The rates came in at the moment, but we're going to look back up a little bit. The rates will be a little bit lower. Our utility contracts are coming up in the end of this school year. Second, we had a discussion about landscaping and snow removal, and Mr. Pignano was going to get us a copy of the Sedesco bills for the snow removal, and we may go for a proposal for that as well. And the final thing we did discuss was placing the resolution for the moratorium on the charter school expansion. There was no vote taken. It was recommended that it come to the full committee discussion. And that was the end of
Thank you. Mr. DeMonico, when would we go out to bid for snow removal? Is it the following year? Yeah.
It would be for the following year. We need to get some more information before we can make a decision on how we proceed going forward.
Typically though, just do we honor that contract in the fall, or do we do it in the spring?
Well, it's all been done through Sedesto, so we may take it back, we may not, we may just choose different vendors, but we have to work through Sedesto.
Understood, thank you. Any other questions? Next item, policy and procedures subcommittee update. Mr. Fiorillo.
Yes, we did meet on Tuesday night. Actually, during fiscal, when we were discussing snow plowing, I just want to thank Councilman Bradley for coming out and helping us with some ideas for the snow removal bid process. He was kind enough to join us. Also, policy did meet the other night. A couple of the big items were the personnel benefit policy for non-unit administrative and support personnel. There's a discussion happening about the fact that most of our non-union administrative staff does not take nearly even close to anything about their vacation time that they get every year. So we're discussing possibly letting them have a 5-day payout at the end of the school year, or banking the 5 days to the following year. It is still under discussion. We're going to get some fiscal impact information, and we'll discuss it in a couple of weeks. Also, we discussed the J1 early entry to kindergarten and first grade policy. As of right now, in order to have early entrance into kindergarten, you would need to score a
On the first assessment and also on the second.
The other night, though, we did vote to reduce the second assessment, which is strictly in intelligence. We did vote to lower the rating from a 95 down to an 80%, which would really only result in 2 or 3 additional students. Still a very high threshold, and that'll be coming up later on the docket. And that is what we have the other night.
Terrific, thank you. Next item is achievement and communication subcommittee update. Mrs. Teal.
Achievement did meet on Tuesday. We had a discussion, sort of a recap on the activities that were taking place in guidance, K through 12, with some emphasis on the high school. It's been nice to see the improvements that have been made on the Chromebooks. They mentioned it made a huge difference in their ability to more quickly interact with the students and problem solve. There's some activities going on with, quite a few activities going on with preparation for the park. And they're also working on getting the students in the high school the opportunity to go to a college fair in Boston and to do more local college tours. So it was quite a nice presentation, and we're happy to see the improvements that are taking place in that. And upcoming, we're going to start using achievement to have the schools individually come before achievement and give a recap of student progress, where they're have great strengths and where they're struggling, their recommendations for change, and then any recommendations that may require action on the part of the school committee. And that next meeting will be, it's the Tuesday before our next Thursday. No, it's the meeting is 6 o'clock before our next Thursday meeting. I'm sorry, it'll be posted. Thank you.
I think also, Mrs. Till, they talked about doing another parent survey, just an interest survey, so that we could gauge as to what the perceived success by parents. And next year, they're becoming more engaged with the sophomore class. I think a lot of focus and effort was on the junior and senior class. So that would be
Yes, we're going to use that time to prepare the students to start thinking about college and to look at their, what their transcript would be saying to attending colleges or employers so that they understand the transcript.
And lastly, we asked that they look at generating interest with other colleges to come and visit the schools, get a little bit more of a broader sample based on maybe a profile that they develop that would tap into student interest. Thank you. Next item on the agenda is the building committee update. Mr. Fiorillo.
The building committee has met several times since its inception back in the fall. Our initial task was to create a energy savings, mostly an energy savings package of projects throughout the district. And we were going through that process when Department of Education recommended highly to us that we change our focus to health and safety renovations, so that we would get our application in before any moratorium might be lifted at the state level. So we have been rushing over the last couple months to try to get all of our ducks in a row. Just recently we put out, as you'll recall, 2 weeks ago we voted to give our engineering and architectural contract to Corrado Associates, who has actually, Alex, is it complete, the inspections? Torado, have they gone through the entire district?
They're just about done, yes.
Okay. They're going through every single building and doing a complete capital facilities plan, which we also were not thinking we had to do, but we were told by Department of Ed a few weeks ago that we needed to do a complete plan all over again. So we went with Torado. Torado is finishing that up, and our application has to be in to RIDE by March 23rd, which gives us very little time. So at this stage of the game, we don't really have any funding in place. We have to still have that conversation with the town, with the mayor, but we are progressing, and hopefully we'll get some very good projects out of this.
Thank you.
For that. We have a meeting with Toronto and RIDE on March 3rd. We'll be down there, and a meeting with the mayor on March 11th, because the town also has a buy-in on this project. The RIDE won't approve the plan unless both the school committee and the town administrators both approve the plan going forward for construction work. So those are two other dates, March 3rd and March 11th, that we have action.
I may have missed part of what you said. Did you say it would be coming back to the school committee for an action? Or it goes to the town for an action?
Well, March 11th, we have a meeting with the architect and an engineering firm is going to meet to brief the town, the mayor,
Yes.
and whoever on his staff chooses to bring. Much of what's happened here, the school committee is pretty aware of the projects and stuff like that, so we'll be back before you guys also tell you what the final results are and the rest of it.
Understood. Thank you. Any other questions? Next item is public hearing, reading of policies, amended policies. Mr. Pirro.
The G6 policy, personnel benefit policy for non-unit administrative and support personnel. Again, that was still in discussion, so we're going to talk about that again in 2 weeks.
Would you like to table it tonight?
Yes, I would actually. I'd like to table it.
So you're moving passage of tabling G6. Do I have a second? Second by Mrs. Teal and Mr. Denon. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That passes 7-0. Thank you, Mr. Pirro.
And J1, early entry to kindergarten, first grade. We did take a vote of 3-0 to change the policy. I'm sorry, did we table that, or we're at that vote? Yeah, we did, okay. I'm not feeling too well tonight, so I'm a little fuzzy. We did vote to change the policy as laid out it is all in your drive. So we're just going to change the threshold for the intelligence aspect of it down to 80%. And like I said, we only feel that's going to make a 2 or 3 child difference into enrollment. So I would move passage of that.
Mr. Fiorillo moves passage of J1, early entry to kindergarten and first grade, and seconded by Mr. Salvatore. So that's an amended policy.
Yes, I'm sorry, that's an amended policy.
Right, we only need to have one reading of that policy. Any further questions or discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? And that motion carries 7-0. Thank you very much, Mr. Fiorillo. Next item is comments from the public. Does anyone in the public wish to speak this evening? Yes, sir. Could you just state your name for the record?
Good evening. My name is Drew Madden, and I come before you today as the Associate Director of Science, Technology, Engineering, and Mathematics, and a former teacher at Blackstone Valley Prep Mayoral Academy. It is our belief that we can work together, side by side, for the betterment of all Cumberland youth. We would welcome the opportunity to work with this group, as we firmly believe that our collective energy should be expanded to improve funding for all young people, rather than engage in an us versus them dynamic. We share all the same goal, that all children from Cumberland, at all schools, will be prepared for success when they graduate and leave our walls. Thank you for your time, and I look forward to continuing to work together for the betterment of all Cumberland youth.
Thank you. Someone else? Yes. Could you state your name for the record, please?
I did not come to yell at you. My name is Carrie Feather, and I am a parent of 3 children, elementary aged, in the Cumberland School District, and I wanted to speak briefly to lend my support to you all for SCR 2015-5, the resolution petitioning the state to place a moratorium on charter expansion. I personally have been very satisfied with the education my children have received in the Cumberland Public School District, and that the schools have performed so well and done so much good despite being severely underfunded. And it's my personal belief that the schools are underfunded because we've got millions of dollars being siphoned away by, for the good of approximately 300 to 400 students. So I support the moratorium because I think that we can actually work to fix the problem before the discrepancy just becomes so big and the money becomes so massive that there are dire consequences. So good job, all. I'm saying.
It's a pleasure to see you.
Sounds right.
Anyone else wish to speak? Next item on the agenda, discussion of fiscal 16 budget timeline. Dr. Thornton.
Mr. Bernardo will fill you in at your places now. You have the dates for the budget process for this spring, I'll say. Mr. Bernardo.
Everyone's got the sheet in front of them. Yeah, I'll just pick out some of the key dates that we still have in front of us. If you look at the 5th box down, February 2015 is a time when the superintendent is busy developing his budget, and I can tell you he is busy doing that. March 12th is our tentative date to submit the budget to the school committee. So we have a little bit of time. We have another couple of weeks to complete our process. Between March 12th and March 26th, you'll see that that time's been set aside for workshops with the school committee, so we can make sure you guys have a good understanding what the superintendent's recommendations will be. March 26th, we're looking for hopefully the school committee to vote to approve the budget, and we would send it down to the town no later than the first Monday in April by charter to the finance director. That would be April 6th this year. The finance director then would have the budget, and I imagine we would go down, sit with him, and make sure he has an understanding of the items that we're looking for and for the town to fund. April 20th, the finance director this year, that's the date, the 3rd Monday in April, will submit the budget to the mayor's office. And the mayor will, you could read the dates, May 11th, 2nd Monday of May, we'll submit it to the town council, and then the town council will have it May, June, and hopefully take some action in time for us to have our budget squared away and, so we could buy items in the summer and stuff that we need to open school on time in August. So those are just some important dates that I thought you should know. And the next big date on here is March 12th, when we'll be looking to submit it to you guys and start our budget hearings.
Thank you. Questions for Mr. Prignano? Also, we will be adding a workshop, I don't see it here, Alex, but the date's a TBD with the town council, the pre-budget hearing workshop. So that'll be an add as well. Dr. Thornton, when we have a chance, can we put this up on the next 2016 budget timeline website? Thank you. Next item on the agenda, update on school closings, school calendar. Dr. Thornton.
Just an update in case there's any questions. We are still looking good. We are June 16th. As you know, we started prior to Labor Day, 3 days. Had 3 days in the historically Fed vacation area. So instead of having the snow date we've had, we're still June 16th. So all is well. I can tell you there's some rain next Wednesday. Could be a rain, snow kind of thing. I'm watching weather a lot. But for now, it's June 16th. We're looking good.
Any impact on the high school graduation?
No.
Nice. Anyone? Mr. Denon?
What about middle school graduation? Do you know about that? Has that been moved at all?
Mass is in here, but I'll defer to him.
Good evening. The middle school promotional exercises are typically scheduled once the school closings have stopped. Okay, so you haven't scheduled yet? We haven't scheduled that, and we do already receive calls about that now. But we are also up against the 180-day school schedule, so we also have to make sure that our 8th graders make sure that they continue through the 180th day. So last year you found that we did our promotional exercises actually on the last day of school at night. So we're foreseeing that taking place this year again, but like I said, we will start to look at scheduling around April, May when snow stops. Thank you. Thank you.
And typically, Dr. Thorpe, we bring the calendar back for reapproval. Is that how it works? Do we have the snow days? No. Yes?
Yes.
I think so. We do adjust it, amend the calendar. Thank you. Next item on the agenda is vote on teacher dismissal recommendations. Dr. Thornton?
Ms. Vogel, I believe.
So in executive session, we brought to you two teacher A and a teacher B recommendation for dismissal pursuant to 1613.3, which requires us to notify any teacher who we intend to dismiss, any tenured teacher we intend to dismiss on or before March 1st. So the superintendent provided you with the information regarding both of those recommendations, and we're asking for you to approve both the dismissal recommendation for teacher A and teacher B.
So we'll take these one by one with teacher A and teacher B. Pleasure of the committee on teacher A.
Madam Chair, make a motion, we issue a termination letter for teacher A.
So we have a motion by Mr. DeMonica and a second by Mr. Salvatore. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Those opposed? That motion carries 7-0. Next item on the agenda is, I'm sorry, Mrs. Teal, we have teacher B. Thank you. Pleasure of the committee on teacher B.
Madam Chair, make a motion that we send a termination letter for teacher B as well.
Thank you, Mr. DeMonica and Mr. Salvatore. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Those opposed? And that motion carries 7-0.
Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry, I almost missed that one. I was looking at Mr. Fiorello. Okay. All right. Next item on the agenda is discussion and/or vote to approve resolution SCPR 2-2015-06 reading program at Joseph L. McCourt Middle School. Dr. Thornton?
This wasn't fiscal, I believe, and voted 3-0.
This was in fiscal, it was withdrawn in fiscal from the agenda. It was being taken care of internally. So there's no action.
I stand corrected.
So there's no action on this, we don't need to table it. Thank you. What specifically is this for, Dr. Thornton? Don't mind my asking?
It's for reading materials at McCourt Middle School that are needed at this point.
Thank you.
If you want to know what detail I've got, I'll tell you what they are, if you want to hear.
Just 2 sentences.
So we have tiered reading response for intervention for students. We have a viable curriculum for the what's considered tier 3 or the most intense. What we were lacking was the tier 2 level. We did have a lot of teacher materials that were developed for that. We were reaching gains, we weren't reaching the gains that we were looking for. So we took a more aggressive approach. We found some budget solutions within our individual school budget at McCourt Middle School to pay for the reading materials, and now over 117 students will be able to get a viable curriculum at the Tier 2 level. And that is the level that will then get them out of reading intervention. So we felt it was extremely important to get to the point where we can move them up to the grade levels that they need to be reading at to achieve the Common Core State standards.
Terrific. Thank you, appreciate that. Next item on the agenda is discussion and/or vote to approve resolution SCR 2015-05, resolution petitioning the state legislature to place a moratorium on charter school expansion. So just as an introduction, I asked this to be put on the agenda, this resolution. And to be honest, we did it for a few reasons. And what we'll do as part of the activity this evening is I did speak with each committee member and prior to the meeting, and I know some folks have concerns, some folks are generally satisfied, some folks are on the committee are supportive of the idea in concept in general. And I really appreciate the feedback that the committee has had. What I thought we would do would be to take the time and go through this with our clerk, Mr. Denon, interactively. We'll put his little feet to the fire and have any modifications made on the fly. So I wanted to start by giving an introduction. We've had a funding formula in place, I think, since 2010, and it was intended to provide equity for students throughout the state. Didn't matter where you went to school, what type of public school you attended, it was really intended to provide you with fairness and equity. In addition to that, sort of in parallel, the concept of a mayoral academy was introduced to the Rhode Island community, and it had, in partner with the funding formula, its own funding strategy around it. At that time, the expectation was that it would be budget neutral to school communities. And what we found, even based on their enrollment projections, that's actually not an accurate statement. And it has been, in total of charters and mayoral academies, a significant amount of money to our budget. And as we've gone through this exercise about the basic education program and what it means to Cumberland and what it means to students from Cumberland, we've recognized there's shortcomings in it. Some of the shortcomings are the totality of the budget for all schools. Even a growing school with a local obligation is 4%. That's problematic when you have 4,500 students and a second school district with 300 students sharing obligation. We also found it problematic in the way that the state aid is provided, in that new schools, new charter and mayoral academies, or new school districts would receive 100% of the state share, yet students in the district in Cumberland, who are part of the 7-year transition plan to totality, receive a portion of that. So as the money follows the child, there's actually seems to be a benefit to leaving the district. That's not what we want. We also know that there's a local share that varies. In addition, one of the basic tenets of the funding formula was that it was intended to provide basic, fair, equitable resources for students. And we are challenged given the fact that some of the total money isn't for instruction. It goes to things like transportation and pensions and tuition. Those numbers that don't support our instructional program but wrap around it are growing disproportionate to what the funding formula monies are being realized in the district. That's created additional problems. So while Mr. Madden, I appreciate your speaking on behalf of the Mayoral Academy, and I'm happy to exchange phone numbers, and we certainly can have some discussion. We've had this discussion for at least 2-3 years right now, and we've educated ourselves as a school on what the basic education program is, what the financing is around it, and how the funding formula works in our community. And to date, we've educated ourselves and haven't found a solution. We've educated the town and the community, we haven't found a solution. And we are aware that the state has the funding commission for the House, that they're looking at the funding formula and some of the impacts of it. We need to be proactive in equity for all students, and what we have are disparities. Money is supposed to follow the child, whether your child attends community school, or Beacon, or the high school, or BV Prep. They should have the resources central to that school. We don't have that ability to do that to the degree we need to. So that is part of the rationale behind this, and that's why we're focused on, we need some action, we need some activity. I know it's not popular with some folks, and it may be popular with others, but it's about equity and fairness for students. So with that, there are essentially 3 or 4 whereas items in here, and then one final item where we make the request to the state legislature. And what I thought we would do is, if we had any introductory thoughts on the committee about it, and silence isn't acceptance in it in any way whatsoever. It's really meant for the committee to have a working meeting, because I think that that's key. Dr. Thornton?
Just one thought to kind of set the table as far as the money. Right now in FY15, we're around $2.7 million for the charter, if you will. Next year, FY16, about $3.4 million. FY17, about $4 million. FY18 is really the year we're looking at. That's the year the funding formula will kind of wrap itself up, and assuming we're all kind of leveled out now. And also is a year that charters go up again. So in FY18, we'll be looking for town funds only to offset the large increase again. So each year the state aid has kept us in the game. The unfortunate part is most of the state aid goes for the increases every year. So with that absent in 18, that's really going to be a problem.
Thank you, and we're aware that solutions in the state don't seem to happen overnight, so that's, I think, part of our immediacy around this resolution, that we're hoping that it can bring some discussions and perhaps some solutions that would benefit all students, quite frankly, in the state of Rhode Island. If you look at what the funding formula was intended to provide, it was intended to provide that equity, but if you look overall at how districts are doing, poor communities were supposed to be some big beneficiaries of this, and what we're seeing is that some of them are actually going backwards in their per pupil expenditure because their local contributions aren't sustaining what their overall costs are. So, for example, in Woonsocket, their per pupil expenditure is $200 or $300 less than what it was when the funding formula started. So you really want to set a baseline so that the state can measure and monitor what's going on with funding. Because they expect results, they expect us to be accountable to our school communities, and they expect students to be successful. So what we'll start with here is just in general and topic, the resolution petitioning the state legislature to place a moratorium on charter school and mayoral academy expansion. There are, you need a second? Yeah. Nope, no worries. So we have a few whereas statements. The first one talks about funding being fair and equitable, and in part based on the principle that resources follow the child. And I think that, yes, that's up there. So what we highlighted in that was tuition payment exceeds corresponding district level savings. In our estimation, money doesn't follow, and the cost savings matches up with that. We're seeing that the savings are not what they were projected to be. The savings are minimal. And then it goes on to say the funding formula is a major step in linking resource allocation to the state and the core instructional amount. We talk endlessly about core instruction, and our core instruction amount, because we're in the scale up, transition years, makes it a challenge for us. When it first started, we were $5 million annually budgeted in the hole. If we were adequate, there would have been a significant amount of resources available to the school community. The next section goes on to talk about that what the obligation would be locally if we were to meet the BEP obligation. The funding formula is built of a state and a local share, and it's based on the community's ability to pay. And In addition, the local obligation includes those things that we talked about earlier, like transportation and pension, those costs that are not subjected to the funding formula. In addition, while it has been demonstrated the state provides $1,000 less per student in fiscal 15 for core instruction amount compared to a student attending a new charter school or mayoral academy, and that the budget for the allocation for those tuitions in total is $2.7 million. If we took the students back, we estimated that it would be, the cost would be $462 compared to the $1.8 tuitions that Cumberland paid to the school. We then asked the General Assembly to place a moratorium on charter school and mayoral academy expansion while identifying the fiscal impact on further expansion and that role Rhode Island Fair Funding Formula plays on the fiscal impact. So what I want to do, if the committee is interested, is we can take through each of the whereas sections, and then we can move beyond that to the resolution itself. We're good? Opening remarks? Anyone? Mr. Duffy?
Just want, I mean, I do have some changes, but my changes actually even begin at the very top part, where what the resolution itself is. Now we can wait to go through the part, and I can get back to that at the end, because mine is more of an overall change to the message, not just line by line as well. I'm not sure how the committee feels which way is better to do it.
Thoughts? Go over it from the top down, give a summary of it? Okay.
So, where I am on this, through like the first 19 lines or so, what we're looking at, I'm good with that. But again, the top, where right now it's resolution petitioning the state legislature to place a moratorium on charter schools and mayoral academy expansion, which is line 1 and 2. I propose it should read, resolution petitioning the state legislature to modify the fair funding formula to adequately fund districts facing charter school and mayoral academy expansion.
Let's go through it, top to bottom, and then we can make some suggestions.
So do you want Mr. Duffy to finish, or do you want him a discussion as we, because I would have a rebuttal to that suggestion.
Yeah, and I think with that, and that's where it's difficult for me to start that without my explanation to where that's going as well. But I think even if I just put that statement, I'm good through a bunch of lines, and then at a certain point, that's where mine is completely different for like the bottom half of it. That's why I'm trying to figure out the best way for us to actually work through this.
Okay, so what I would say is if we're good with the first grouping of lines, you know, you've talked about what you would amend the title of the resolution to. Why don't you summarize first for us what the changes would be in the...
I'll give you a gist of what I'm looking at and then we can go. So where I start making my changes is on line 18. I'm not sure, can people see the lines over there as well? Okay, all right. So where I start my changes is in whereas the state provides 100% of the state share of Rhode Island Fair funding formula to the mayoral academies since the funding formula adoption. So that's where I begin my edit, and I'm removing from there down to the next 2 paragraphs. So that whereas in the next while, how's that? And I'll show you, I'll explain what I put in. Bear with me, because my piece of paper doesn't have lines, but I should be able to get it in the right spot. Okay, so where we're removing 18 and 19 at that point, I have, and whereas the Cumberland public school system, the mayoral, I'm sorry, I can actually pass the copies to you guys. Would that actually make it easier? I apologize. Whereas the Cumberland public school system, the mayoral academy, and other charter schools offer a diverse choice for Cumberland students, a funding formula must be created to allow all of these educational institutions to continue to thrive. And it has been demonstrated in the town of Cumberland that the Cumberland Public School Department, CSD, and CSD students have been adversely impacted by the current funding formula. Whereas the creation of charter schools and mayoral academies are approved by the state and not the sending district taxpayers or the sending district school committees or town councils. Whereas in the fiscal year 2015 budget, the Cumberland School Department allocation to charter schools and Merrill Academy tuitions is $2.7 million. Now therefore, let it be resolved, the Cumberland School Committee asks the state legislature to modify the fair funding formula to remove the state mandated burden of funding the expansion of multiple school districts on the town of Cumberland and Cumberland taxpayers. Be it further resolved that any current or future state mandated fiscal impact for charter school expansion should be funded completely by the state, who established the charter schools and Merrill Academies without local voter approval until the fair funding formula can be revised to adequately fund all public schools. And that's where mine would end. So what I'm getting at is, so it's the same message to me, that what we're putting out there is that we have a funding issue that we need to be resolved. We, as a community, didn't vote for these things at the state mandate. So to not put the halt on what's happening, that the state approved for these charter schools to grow, that if they want to continue to approve growth until we can figure out a fair formula, that they should bear the full burden of any expansion going forward, not on the community itself. That's where I'm with it.
Got it. Any questions or comments?
So, this is Dale. So I guess my desire to have a moratorium is that, well, I would like to think that they would resolve the funding issue. We've consistently demonstrated that that's probably not the case, and that we are facing an extremely serious financial crisis in the school district because of the expansion, due in part because of the expansion of two things in my mind. The expansion of the charter schools, in particular the Mayoral Academy, because it's not, they get their full share while we don't, so there's an inequity in the funding. And also we are suffering from the fact that there is a number that the state has established as the appropriate number that needs to be available to adequately educate students in Rhode Island. It doesn't matter if you're in Cumberland, Barrington, Bristol, or wherever, at any school, that's the dollar figure. That's the dollar figure that they base what they're giving us, but they don't require that the local share meet the rest of that monies, and that's a huge issue for Cumberland. So I think that is a larger problem to solve, and because it's such a serious issue, that to me, it's a stronger message that it needs to be a moratorium, because we just can't afford to keep going down this path, and we need them to resolve this issue now, and then figure out the funding solution. They can't allow this to continue while they're figuring out the funding solution. We just don't have the luxury of that time at this point. The students don't have the luxury of that time.
Thank you, Mr. DeMonica.
Madam Chair, I believe we should have a moratorium, but only for Cumberland children and not for the rest of the state. This is a Cumberland local issue. What happens in Woonsocket, Cranston, or any other school district is their problem to deal with. They're all following what we're doing here in Cumberland and how it's affecting our budget, and they're appearing at the State House to testify. It's a money issue. It's us versus them, and I hate to say it, but that's what it comes down to. It's us versus them. We don't have the money to keep on providing all the things that we want to here when their money comes off the top. Then my suggestion that we don't fund mayoral academies and make them go in front of the town council and ask for their own money as well. Why should it come off our budget when we have no say whatsoever in regards to it? I believe we have to put a moratorium, but not hurt the children that are currently in the charter schools. Just not enroll any more new children that are kindergarten grade and wait a year and see what happens with the legislature if they're going to come through and resolve this issue, because it's only going to get worse as the mayoral academies expand throughout the state. You know, there's a letter in the Valley Breach that says for Woonsocket that nothing's going to, the budget doesn't get hurt, the funding follows the child. That's baloney. I mean, we're demonstrating it here today that we need money to do repairs and do things in the school district that we can't afford to do because we know right off the top that money going down the street, they're not an art school like Beacon is or or a nursing school, they're just a public school like we are, that happens to have a lot of money thrown at them right now because they're a charter to expand their day. I'd love to expand the day here in Cumberland and let the children go to school line. I'd love to get buses for North Cumberland and community so that kids don't get home at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. We can't afford that. And that's become an issue, and it's just gotten worse. We've talked about it, and nothing's happened. It's fallen on deaf ears. So by us sending this to the legislature and asking them to do a moratorium on this, I'm in full support. As long as we don't hurt the current children that are there.
Thank you. Mr.
Just quick response to Ms. Teal. So I understand where you're coming from, that the moratorium sent a strong message. But the moratorium, what that would end up doing, it wouldn't affect the state at all by imposing a moratorium. If we take them both to the extremes and let's say the moratorium, they took this and they actually passed a bill on it, or they took the one that I read and they passed a bill on it, my bill would cost the state money, a lot of money, which would make it even quicker for them to come to a resolution to fix it, because now it would stop the money coming out of our system and the growth that they have on the way that I have it listed. The children would still be able to go to the school if they choose a different school outside of the Cumberland Public School System, and we wouldn't bear the financial burden of that. It would fall on, the burden would fall in the state's hands.
I appreciate the intent of that. I just feel that it's necessary to send, the language is simpler and stronger, and I don't believe the state is going to assume that responsibility. I believe that it's not going to work exactly that way. And that by asking for a moratorium, it's just a stronger message that this just cannot continue, and they need to stop the expansion until they resolve this issue. I appreciate that Mr. DeMonica wants to contain this as a Cumberland issue, but it's an extremely difficult Cumberland issue, but it's also an issue facing Woonsocket. It's facing all of these communities. I don't have a problem supporting a resolution that protects all students within the state of Rhode Island. It's not just Cumberland students that are being adversely impacted by this. It's many students that have new charter schools, particular mayoral academies, that receive the full funding located in the communities. I'll support it if you want to change the language, but I feel like I have a responsibility to sort of warn other communities this is not going to go well for you, and that we're trying to do something that will, kind of learn from our mistake, learn from what's happening here. And with regards to this whole discussion about the money follows the kids, I'm just so tired of that pat little sentence. That is only half of the thought. No one's arguing that the funding's following the kids, it's the problem. The problem is the expenses don't follow the kids. And we have demonstrated over and over and over. We had this conversation when this mayoral academy was first brought up, that there is no way you get a one-to-one correlation between the money and the expenses. It simply was never going to work. It never has worked, and it never will work. And it's, it just finally needs to be strongly said that this is just not, that the funding formula does not work. It does not treat all children fair and equitably. And there are winners and losers in this. And right now, Cumberland Public School students are serious losers in this discussion. And it's just not right anymore. And that message, as they're thinking about this, needs to be clearly said to them.
Thank you. All right, so Mr. Denton.
Can I add something?
Yeah, sure.
Just about the moratorium, I support the limiting it to Cumberland. I think it's weird for us to ask for a moratorium that affects other municipalities. And, Pawtucket wants to send kids to charter schools. Why would we stop them? That's the way I feel.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, what we'll start with is we'll just go through a mass edit. Mr. Denton, when you need a break, let us know, and we'll make Mr. Fiorella check for that. Okay, so we'll start with the beginning, where, and we'll leave the title for later, because I think that's sort of the icing. So with the first one, whereas the Rhode Island Fair funding formula is based on fair and equitable funding and in part the principle that resources follow the child. Anyone have any changes or modifications? No? Everyone satisfied with that? Good? Okay, so this one's okay. And then it's been demonstrated that mandated tuition payment exceeds any corresponding district level savings estimated for students leaving the Cumberland School Department to attend a charter or mayoral academy. Good? Satisfied? All right. Next item, whereas the Rhode Island Fair funding formula constituted a major step in linking resource allocation to the state standards on a core instructional amount that adequately and equitably funds student instructional needs as described in the basic education program. Now I think it's complicated, but we got 3 okays. And it's been demonstrated that the town of Cumberland, that the Cumberland School Department would require more than $4 million of additional funding to meet the BDP obligation. And it was discussed in fiscal that we believe that that number is growing. And the UCOA, yes, Dr. Darden?
So that number is actually around 5.3 right now. Mr. Bernardo has the backup if you want to discuss that.
Does anyone have any questions regarding that? Mr. Fiorillo?
I would say that if we know the number's 5.3,
In excess of? In excess of 5? Yes. I would delete. Would require more, so would require in excess of $5 million of additional funding to meet the BDP obligation. Dr. Thornton, so last year we talked a bit about this, it was 4, now it's 5.3. What are the budget busters in that? Mr. Prignano, can you come to the microphone?
It's the same, it's the growth of the non-core expenditures, the 2 biggest ones being charter schools and state pension. I mean, that's basically it. That non-core group, that if you recall the sheet I gave you, those items below the line, they're growing faster than the core expenses, the instructional type items.
And just quickly, for this year's pension obligation, do we have any anticipated increase?
Yeah, it'll be about almost $500,000.
So it's in addition to last year?
Yes.
And the charter expense is expected to be?
Well, RIDE's estimating charter expenses to grow $823,000 next year.
So that's 1 point, that's the 1.3. 2 items, thank you. Mr. Dunn.
The language of it has been demonstrated. I know we just discussed it, but we need to go back to something that was actually demonstrated in front of the committee. Do you know what I mean? Group walkthrough, just to make this actionable. Well, it says it's been demonstrated. We heard tonight that it's in excess of 5, but previously we've got a demonstration of why it was in excess of 4. It's a technicality. I don't doubt that it's 5, I'm just wondering the language here.
Like if we had an audit report, we would, say it was an audited number type of thing. So we came up with this number. Who came up with this number? When did we have a specific?
So we could leave it at 4 and then say anticipating additional costs of 1.3.
Yeah, I'm not stickler on it. I just wondered if we need to be careful here with just what really happened. It was demonstrated before, it was discussed at 5, that's all.
I think 4 is okay too, 4 or 5.
Yeah, it's 25%.
4 still sends the same message as 5.
So more than 4 is, could be 5.
Thank you. Will we change to 4?
Yes, we don't.
Thank you. We leave it in excess.
Yes, thank you. No? All right, moving along. Where the state provides 100% of the state's share of the Rhode Island Fair Funding Formula to the Mayoral Academy since the formula's adoption. No. The charter, as I understand it, because the Mayoral Academy is a new school and we don't have any new charter schools, they would be if it was a new one. It's not a new charter school. That's a good point, because they will open new grades. That is accurate, yes. So you could amend this to include to the charter schools, to
Essentially, expanding payroll houses and charter schools. They really get it because when they expand, they get 100% of the funding dramatically.
yes. Does that work?
Yes.
So while Mr. Dennett's typing, maybe we can have Mr. Prignano, we can put this in the fiscal agenda just so that we can have that for the record and then bring it forward for the next committee meeting. The unaudited number that you handed to me.
Well, I think the $4 million was through 13, and I recently updated it when we got recent elevation numbers and those types of things. And I think we met when we went at 7:30 in the morning. Sure.
No, I don't think so. So I think it would be good.
Yeah, I don't doubt the number. It's more of being factual.
Putting it into the record. Okay. Next item is after a while. It has been demonstrated that the state provides approximately $1,000 less per student in fiscal 15 for the core instructional amount for students of the Cumberland School Department compared to students attending a new charter or mayoral academy.
I have a suggestion to sort of, to eliminate the $1,000, keep it more general. I'll read it to see how everybody feels about it. It has been demonstrated that the state is not fair and equitable, and I'm going to use Cumberland students now. It has been demonstrated that the state is not fair and equitable toward all Cumberland students, as it does not provide the same core instruction amount to a Cumberland student regardless of whether the student attends a charter school, mayoral academy, or district school, as the district and charter schools receive a prorated amount while the mayoral academy receives the full core instruction amount. I can change that to mayoral academy and expanding charters, as they would receive the core instructional amount. But I didn't know who would help to eliminate some of the numbers and have it a more general statement.
One word there is regardless.
Of whether the student attends a charter.
I think it's depending on whether they, it depends on which school they go to. If they go to a, does that make sense?
I'm happy to say that.
Sorry. You're going to have to read it again to me so I can type it in.
Do you want me?
Actually, we should discuss it.
Right, I don't know if everything agrees to or not.
So I guess at this point, this is where I am, this is where all my major changes took place as well. So, and all of my changes is more of a, changes the whole complexity of what we were sending, the resolution itself. So at this point, I guess I'm looking to the committee, we have to decide at some point, what's the tone of the letter going to be? Is it going to be the initial one that we had, or are we going to go with, the moratorium, that if students, want choice, that we're saying that they shouldn't have it for the next year, that side? Or are we saying, okay, everything can continue to go, but we want the burden removed from us until the fair funding formula can be determined at that point? Because at this point, if we're going to move forward with editing, we as a group have to decide which way to go.
So, general input? Edit as is, or with Mr. Duffy's suggestions?
Well, I stated I'm in favor of the moratorium, but I'll leave it to what the majority is interested in.
Others? Mr. DeMonica?
I'm in favor of the moratorium, so I don't think the state will act anytime soon, no matter what we do.
Understood. Anyone else?
Yeah, I think that there's value in saying that we want the state to fix the funding formula, and I think that's where you were headed. It's almost like a merging of the two. Like we can take some of your suggestions and add them to this, and then, to be honest with you, at the end we can decide exactly what we're asking for. But it does seem like the funding formula is broken. It's been demonstrated that the town of Cumberland adversely affected by the current funding formula. That seems like an important thing to say.
And I think that just to give it, I think the message was the same, that we have a funding issue that needs to be resolved by the state. But I wanted to go the avenue of, look, we've had enough battles within this town between the school department and charter schools and the mayoral academies and all this. And I think that when you mention moratorium in mayoral academies and charters, we're just starting another battle. I feel the way that the avenue that I was trying to take with this was, we can, if us and the mayoral academies and the charter schools and Beacon, if we all agree that there's a funding issue, this is something that we can work hand in hand together to try to fix. And to me, once we mention a moratorium, I don't see people from those other educational institutions walking hand in hand with us to try to fix this funding issue. So that's where I was with it.
Yes, Mr. Salvatore.
Madam Chair, my stance on this is it comes down to a basic math problem that has to be figured out via the state. I'm not against charter schools. I'm not against mayoral academies. I like the choice. But there's clearly a problem here. We have 4,500 children that could be affected within the next 3 years, and we need the state to fix this formula. I'm not looking to stop the lottery. I'm not looking to close up doors on charter schools or on public schools. I do think we do need to work together on this. I can't remember who said it, or Paul said it. If this gets passed tonight, it's not edged in stone where it's going to stop everything going on. This still has to be sponsored. This is technically a recommendation, correct?
It's a resolution.
It's a resolution of a recommendation that the General Assembly has to bring in front of them to decide what they're going to do. So my stance is we do need to send a message to the state. Again, I'm not against the charter school, but the funding here, it's a math formula, and this needs to be clearly defined. Possibly in favor to help everybody coexist within the same arena. Thank you.
Mr. Dennon.
Yeah, should we talk a little bit about what a moratorium means? Because Mr. Salvatore, you said you don't want to, I forget your words, but restrict people from going there, but at the same time, I think I heard you say you wanted a moratorium.
Well, thank you. Madam Chair, yeah, I apologize, expansion. I do not want any kids to be affected in any negative way as we're continuing. I don't want to say in a bad way or disrespectful, but I'm not looking to throw a wrench into something that's already moving. But yet, let's give the state a year or whatever it needs to figure this out. So let business run as it should run, and then we implement a moratorium on it.
Okay, so there's a couple of items here. We have the discussion around holding students harmless, which, correct me if I'm wrong, I'll make a statement and we'll see if that matches what the collective group thinks, assuming you support a moratorium. Holding harmless means that a student who is moving through one of those schools would move to the next grade, and there would be no requirement to return anywhere or make some other options or alternate decisions. Correct? Yes? I'm sorry. Yes?
Yes,
Yes.
my understanding is if your charter school is grade 1 through 3, grade 3 goes to 4, which you don't open. So 1 moves to 2, 2 to 3, 3 to 4, but you don't continue accepting grade 2 students. Is that what you
Understand? Yes. Well, okay with that.
I just want to clarify, so I'm not comfortable with anything that was sent up that is a moratorium myself. Again, I just think it sends the wrong message and the wrong tone. I think we have an issue that needs to be addressed. I just don't like it addressing it in that manner. That's all.
Thank you. And I would, I would disagree. I think the message of a moratorium, as we've seen with other activities that have caused folks to partner and work together, the fact is that the math doesn't allow us to create solutions that can improve our schools and support the fiscal obligation that the state has mandated. So we're stuck within a 4% budget. We can only ask for that, and the likelihood of the combined schools getting more than that, based on history, is non-existent. We appreciate what the town has done in an effort to make inroads and their acknowledgement that there needs to be a solution. Many have campaigned on that at a variety of levels within our school community. And in addition to that, there has to be a sense of urgency around this. And if the sense of urgency is going to be next year, that's not urgent. And if you provide that ability to walk away, we lose it. We have an urgent issue that's a funding crisis for us, and Dr. Thornton mapped out what it will look like in a handful of years. It will be serious. And the urgency that parents who want to attend a lottery or a charter school is that if they really want their kids to attend there, then work on a solution with us. And I think that's why I proposed a moratorium for students, because I think, given the constraint, there's certainly a need for all of us to solve this problem. That allows us to do it with more immediacy. Okay, Mr. Fiorello.
Just to be clear, so they would not, we would be recommending that they're not allowed to bring in new kindergarten class this year or this year? Would that be stopped?
So in the scenario we talked about, in the way that it's drafted, any new growth would not occur. So if a school had an enrollment of X number of kids, as the kids age out, you would not replace them on the back end. So if it was a K through 12 school and you had new K kids coming in the next year, the moratorium would freeze that until the funding was solved.
Basically, over an end.
It would risk putting an end unless a solution was found. And keep in mind, we're not legislating. We're not legislating anything here. I mean, it's a request. So as we requested other things at the General Assembly, because we felt passionate about that, they don't have to act. Mr. Dennett.
I appreciate that. I think there may be some middle ground. We want to ask the General Assembly to fix the funding formula. And we have this immediate problem, so we need it solved immediately. There are two options there. We could have a moratorium or we could have more money from the state. So our resolution could ask them to fix the funding formula, but while we're waiting for that to be fixed, they provide more money for us. Or they put a moratorium. Is anybody interested in that? That to me, it puts the burden on the General Assembly for how they answer our request for help.
Mr. Duffy.
So that's exactly what mine is, and the extra money would be the state paying for the expansion. So I think that the real difference is, if you look at the two, is its tone. I think is the difference between the two resolutions we have in front of us. So if you're hung up on moratorium, because that's a strong word and that will send a strong message, then find a way to work moratorium into the town of Cumberland, will hold a moratorium on sending additional money for growth, or whatever it is. So if you just want that word in there,
Break the law.
right. So I guess we just agree to disagree at this point.
All right, well, let's see if we can move this along to a point where there is some consensus. So who would like to have it be such that there's not a moratorium? Mr. Duffy is in that. Everyone else interested in a moratorium?
I would not. No, I think I'm not agree with you. Just, I don't want to stop any being able to work as a kindergarten class. So I like the idea of a moratorium on our dollar, not increasing the state fund any future children.
I don't think the state will give you $1 more than it has committed to giving you. I think that's the reality. It's running into enormous issues, and there's not a money tree, and every time they keep shaking it, there's bigger holes. All right, so we have, and let me ask you this, Mr. Fiorello, so you want to allow them to continue to grow?
I would want to agree that I don't want to see buildings, I don't want to see
So no expansion.
no true expansion. I would be against Beacon being another school.
So you want to provide the option of a moratorium and no expansion. I'm sorry, a moratorium and some level of state funding. Others? So do we have,
What's the different use of the word moratorium? It's a different meaning. Then what we talked about previously.
so we can certainly spell out what moratorium, by moratorium.
That means no new kindergarten class.
No,
Yeah.
that the state is right.
So unless the state provides compensation. So a moratorium on expansion.
Yeah, unless. As long as the state is going to do it.
So you're saying any expansion in enrollment, which is slightly different than what you said. So it's expansion in enrollment?
Expansion of enrollment unless it stays there. No expansion.
So we are percentage of state share. We closed that one, right? Okay, that we updated the
$1,000
$1,000.
in system.
Right, so we completed the $1,000 one. Is that correct? Or we did not?
No, I would say
So it sounds like the direction we're going in is a little bit of both. So we're going into a moratorium, Dr. Dorr?
Small math way to frame the urgency level, if you will. If the state prediction comes true this year for the charter increase, we'll only see about 120,000 increased state aid. It's about a 2.25% ask of the town for the charter increase. We're going to look at it. So it's a big number already. It's going to get very big. It's already very big.
So there will be basically no additional funds for existing homeowners. 100,000.
Worst case,
If they
Thank you, Dr. Gardner.
Which I'll go back and advocate on, again, the strongly worded moratorium. It's, I feel sometimes you have to use the power of those words in order to get attention. This is not going to be legislation. This is not going to be exactly what's passed. This is basically to get their attention, to show them that we have a serious issue that needs a serious discussion. Fine-tuning our language. No one up here has said that we are against charter schools, we're against mayoral academies. Like, we're all strong believers in public education. We believe that public education be delivered in multiple ways. What we just are requiring is that it is fair and equitable. And I think you need to keep that language strong and concise in order for them to understand, listen, we are desperate for some relief here. This is not working. We're now just finding out that all of the things that we want to do, adding a computer program in the high school, expanding the biotechnology, adding Chromebooks, is $100,000 going to cover that? There is no way we are going to be able to continue the progress that we've started in this district if we keep hemorrhaging money. A serious issue requires serious language. And you need to feel like you have to take a stand and use the big words and use serious language in order to get their attention to solve the problem. There's no sense of kind of pussyfooting around this issue. It's huge to the students in this town.
Yeah, and I think also recovering from it, we had years of level funding, and that's been problematic for us moving forward. To recover from that and recover from what will absolutely, it's predictable now. Before, it wasn't predictable. It was going to be zero impact, and over the years, we've recognized that it's a predictable amount of money. Do you think we can improve some of the language here in the paragraph that says it's been demonstrated that the state provides approximately $1,000 less per student? Now, Mrs. Taylor, you made some modifications to that. Is there disagreement in that statement that Mrs. Taylor provided? No, so we're good. Others? Sure, and you should be able to see it on the Chromebook, which was why we had, it should have been a shared one.
No, I didn't. I just wrote it and read it.
Oh, and you have to put it in here. Why don't we have you put it in while I'll try to navigate here to find that.
I don't need you to read it. I didn't memorize it.
Gosh, you work on it. It has been demonstrated that the state is not fair and equitable. Toward all Cumberland students, as it does not provide the same core instruction amount to a Cumberland student depending on whether the student attends a charter school,
Charter.
mayoral academy, or
when is this, what is the budget for the retirement? How many more years are we looking at this?
Five.
16, 17, 18,
My question, Mrs. Steele, the state is not there, how about the state funding formula is not there? Well, I guess, I don't want to decide that.
I don't know, maybe people. Yes, sir.
Another way to look at the math again, another way to look at it, of the state aid coming in, 90 cents out of the dollar would go to the charter increase. That helps you.
Just to the charter,
The Imperial Academy charter increase, 90 cents out of the dollar.
not pensions,
No.
just the charter.
Yes.
Does that include any increase in town?
No, it's not a town. The town is a different conversation.
Well, no, the state, to give you a perspective, the state aid coming in would go to our district, but the amount of money going out is about 90% to local, the local shared tuition right now. So no, it's not a double, it's a single, just giving you the perspective of it. We have virtually no state aid, which means we then rely entirely on the town for all of our increases. That's correct. Yes. As the formula is prescribed now. Yeah. So take a look at the highlighted paragraph. We could delete the following one, the "it has been demonstrated" the $1,000 one. And I would just like to know if there's agreement on that.
No, I don't, and that's what, I have no issue with everything you have in between, because you're just stating facts. I don't have any issue with any of that sort of stuff. It's just the way that I did it just changes the tone in the beginning and the end, but all your facts are, I'm not disagreeing with any of those parts. I was just taking some of that stuff out to include other stuff to change the tone, that's all.
Thanks for clarifying.
I stand corrected, 85.50. 85 cents, 15 cents.
85. Thank
Want to
you.
be accurate.
Are we good with this paragraph? We can move on?
Yeah, did I mess up by saying the pension?
Sure. It's been demonstrated that the state funding formula is not fair and equitable toward all Cumberland students, as it doesn't provide the same core instruction amount to a Cumberland student depending on whether the student attends a charter school, mayoral academy, regardless of,
That was like what?
yes.
Okay, thank you, sorry about that.
Mayoral academy or district school, as the district and charter schools receive a prorated amount, while the mayoral academy and expanding charter school receive the full core instruction amount. I think it's important to indicate that, but what I would also say is that the local share, there's a difference between what the district students yield and what the charter and mayoral academy students yield. So we may want to say it's not fair and equitable We may want to say that there's a prorated amount, but we would also want to say that the district yields the highest local share. So again, place to the disparity. Not as a result, it's part of the transition. Want to add that? I just did. As the state term, and where are you? At the end? Yeah. We could say it has also been demonstrated that the local share to district students is greater than that of charters and mail-on. You have to tell the whole story. Are we in agreement that we delete the next section about the $1,000 less, as we've covered it? Excellent, thank you. Okay, so then there's the next section about the $2.7 million and then the take back. Are we keeping that or are we removing it?
Is that a line?
I pointed out to her for that.
That's a fact.
Yeah, that's correct.
Yes. So maintain that in here? Okay. So then what we have left are some of Mr. Duffy's comments, which he's added. And they still,
So there was one last fact,
yep,
where in fiscal year 2013-2014, so it demonstrated that part of the students are we all in agreement with that fact? I think that's what you said, right? You were okay with the fact.
Well, I think that we took that fact from Phil and from Mr. Vignano. So to me, I trust their numbers, so if they're going to claim today that that is a fact, then I will accept that.
Yes.
thank you.
Do we need the fiscal,
I'm sorry, I finished.
do we need the first clause in fiscal year 2013 and 14 as a It's a little weird.
The only reason I have it there is that that number will change every year. I'm actually looking at doing it again this year. We have 163 kids out right now, all charters in schools. That would be 14-15 fiscal year, different number, different scenario. I was trying to be accurate in terms of the year.
So some of our work is as current as we can make it, some is a little bit in arrears. The information that we have.
Can I propose a change? It has been demonstrated that the Cumberland students have returned to the Cumberland School Program in fiscal year 2013. Also create,
I have no objection.
I could write it to make sure I do that. With that, with that number,
We don't,
how about is the 1 million just the payroll patterns or the choice or the 1 million? In fiscal 2015, is this compared to the 1.8 million in tuition that will be used?
That was just the 286 students at BVB, that model.
All right, so we only took the
Model, that's correct.
so give it a quick read and let me know if you're in agreement.
every single part of the students.
But we could say students had returned. I think what it differentiated was that it was not the total, but it was the students who had left.
Yeah, the different part is. Okay.
Okay, so what's remaining is the ask, and in addition, we have some of Mr. Duffy's. I don't know if we want to quickly go through these to see, read them quickly, and if we want to add some, we can certainly do that. Yes, we'd like that. Thank you. Mrs. Steele.
I like the language that the creation of charter schools in Mayoral Academy are approved by the state and not the Senate districts. And I think that's also an important fact that this has been imposed on the district without us being able to really properly enhance this eventuality.
I agree.
Say they were going to say all of that without consideration of this commission action. That's an addition. Yeah.
I think we can add it above the now, therefore let it be resolved.
Especially like the sending district taxpayers.
Sure. There is nowhere in the statement that we talk about the RIDE, because they're the ones that are causing this mess, with allowing the expansion to go without looking at the funding to go along with it. And I'd like to see the legislature direct RIDE to stop this nonsense. So they will figure it out. Can't let those that are down and just walk away from this because they like charter schools. That's my.
Yeah, well, we have the language says whereas the creation of charter schools and Mayoral academies, we could say whereas charter schools and Mayoral academies are approved by RIDE and not the sending district taxpayers or the sending district school committees and town councils.
I think that works, especially if you're adding the fiscal impact to the end of that.
Can I say Rob?
Or you could just change the state here to RIDE too.
That's what
You
I'm
just
doing.
threw it there instead of before.
At the end, we're adding without, the gist is without consideration to the local fiscal impact. Is that what you're going to say? Consideration of? To the sending district? Or just here?
Sending district. Charter and mayoral academies are approved by RIDE and not the sending district taxpayers or sending district school committee or town council. And not, the charter schools and mayoral. town councils without consideration of the local fiscal, let's say that district.
School rates. It's acceptable. Like the Sunday district taxpayers must be paid for town councils. Great.
Collaborate. And then the last, okay, last but not least. So why don't we just quickly take a read through this, and then take a read through Mr. Duffy's, and we might need to provide some clarification about cooling harmless, as Mr. Fiorello had pointed out. Mrs. Hill, let's do the vote.
It's sort of like compromise, it may not satisfy you, but the Cumberland School Committee requests that the state legislature modify the fair funding formula to, one, eliminate the negative fiscal impact of charter schools and mayoral academies enrollment on the Cumberland School District. I won't say in other districts, since we're sort of, it seems like the intent is to focus on Cumberland. And two, ensure the basic education program is adequately funded at a state and local level. Additionally, the Cumberland School Committee requests that the state legislature place a moratorium on expanding enrollment in charter schools and mayoral academies while the legislature works to eliminate said adverse impact, holding harmless all students presently attending those schools. So I know there was concern that if we didn't want existing students harmed, I know you were somewhat wanting to allow expansion of enrollment.
Well, I know when you come down to it, I know they're holding the lottery next week, so this won't affect this year anyways.
Is that your intent?
I'm just going to keep arguing, I'm going to go right back to the numbers and keep arguing that. I just do not feel like we can't afford the expansion, there's no money left. So,
And they're going to do it.
Yeah, okay, Mr. Salvatore. I would just add that, again, we're putting a lot of ideas and a lot of concerns here, all legitimate. And each year we go back to the expectation that we have for students and trying to get Dr. Thornton to do the 10-pound ham and a 5-pound bag. No offense. But it's a challenge, it's not going to go away, and it sounds like it will continue so that the impact locally will be on the community for the next 5, 10, 12 years until the next school goes out. So Mrs. Teal had proposed some language. Anyone have any thoughts?
Do you want to write it?
Mr. Salvatore, sorry about that.
That's okay, thank you. Mr. Duffy, just looking for some explanation on your bottom paragraph, where be it forth resolved by the current or future state mandates, you read it out? Yep. Fiscal impact from the charter school expansion should be funded completely by the state who established the charter schools. Is that just a typo? In what way? Should be funded completely by the state who established the charter schools.
Well, we could have said RIDE instead of the state, but RIDE is created by the state, they're allowed to do that. So, no, that was my exact intention was. So my intention was...
Yeah, I didn't understand it.
Yeah, my intention was just to hold all students harmless and those who would be entering in next year's lottery harmless as well, but holding us harmless from not having to pay that money, that the state would pick up that tab instead of us while they figure it out. That's, so, just because it seems like we're wrapping up. So I think the real difference is just in tone. it's the same message, two different tones. And there's some people on the committee who want to take a very serious moratorium tone. And I wanted to have the tone going forward that we could potentially work with these other groups to figure this out together going forward. Not that you guys don't, but two separate tones might, when it comes out after this, might lead this whole thing in two completely separate, distinct directions too, as well. So.
Mr. DeLong.
Could we not add it here to say, we ask the state and the legislature to direct RIDE to place a moratorium on future expansion? Because that's what it comes down to. RIDE is going to do what they want to do. If they have direction, something from the state saying don't do it. You know what I'm saying? So our biggest beef is RIDE. They're not listening to anybody. I think we have to ask the legislature to tell them to place the moratorium. That's what we want. We want them to fix it, but we need them to tell RIDE to stop.
Well, if they legislate a moratorium, that would be the edict to cease. So I think our request is in alignment with what you were describing. We go with the language of a moratorium. But a good point. You're doing an excellent job. Appreciate it. Here. Here's one right there. I didn't drink it.
I have a question. This doesn't mention the moratorium on Cumberland only. What do you think about that? Really?
Stretch.
I
Still think it did all other states.
What's that?
I crossed out.
Yeah, you guys are other districts, eliminate the negative fiscal impact on Cumberland and other districts, you guys are other districts. But at the end, additionally, the Cumberland School Committee requests that the state legislature place a moratorium on expanding enrollment. That's global. In Cumberland? That's a question for everyone. I feel better.
Yep, I'll come to that, and I know you said it quietly with Mrs. Teal, but if the problem isn't solved in all communities, the problem will escalate pretty significantly. So if you look at Woonsocket, as I said earlier, their PPE is $300 less than what it was originally, and Providence, even though they've had millions of dollars infused, and it's not entirely the result of competing tuitions, their per pupil is up $300. It's not a significant amount, and they're the most impoverished students. And if you read anything about achievement, it talks about if you defund impoverished school programs, you'll never recover. And I think folks need to be aware of that. I can respect that you want to have this limited to Cumberland, but I think it's an enormous disadvantage. And if you look at Providence School Board had asked, they had an education commission look at the charter school proposal when it first came in Providence, and they suggested to the Department of Education that they only honor one of the two requested mayoral academies because they said there were a number of reasons. They were putting better programming in place, and they thought that would allow them to better address the achievement concerns. But one of the items was they felt that the fiscal impact in Providence was going to be too significant. So here we have a much smaller community with a pretty significant enrollment.
And I I would just say, it's your tax dollars. They're going to be spent locally and statewide. You don't solve the problem. You're going to be spending this money all throughout the whole state. It's just as important to solve it in Cumberland as it is throughout the state. Yep.
I agree with that. Feel that our role as a Cumberland school.
That's fine.
Either way?
No.
Thank you, that's.
That's
Should
right.
we see if I have to?
On expanding enrollment in charge from the mayoral academies in Cumberland. In charter schools and mayoral academies in Cumberland, or in Cumberland charter schools and mayoral.
In Cumberland?
Places a moratorium on expanding enrollment in charter schools and mayoral academies.
Really would want to.
So do you want to say on expanding enrollment in Cumberland charter schools and mayoral academies? I think that is a good point.
Well, does it make sense? We just want to limit it to affect only Cumberland students. I'm not sure how we do that.
It goes back to the small state. You could put a charter school that would pull students. It could be located in Pawtucket that would pull Cumberland students. It's why it's why it's an issue that is larger than simply Cumberland.
But I think, what I feel is I don't think the physical problems ours because our schools are doing these things, we know where they are, and we don't want to send them to them.
Part of the issue being that when they're located in the community, you're going to naturally have a tendency for more students that would naturally select that school rather than travel to another community.
So the topic is whether or not to include Cumberland within this.
Yeah.
I think if they understand the intent, is that you're referencing Cumberland.
Yeah.
I mean, they're.
You could have a school that has statewide draw for nurses in Pawtucket, and construction academy, it's statewide draws. They expand further, you could have problems, I mean, Lincoln, Western, they paying what their real tuition. The nurses get nurses school. So it does have statewide implications, like grade is a Cumberland issue. We're spearheading it throughout the state because everyone's looking at us and saying, whoa, time out, what Barfield and Smithfield is going to do it. Because our numbers are there, they actually see what's doing.
Mr. Sullivan?
So, Mr. Donica, you're in favor of leaving it with the state? I'm in favor with that as well. Leave the language as is.
Is that the consensus?
Yeah. I changed one word, and I see some more word, and I think it's like security requests. Let's say what replace some more.
Yes.
Maybe it was a typo. Okay.
Okay. So that would mean we would remove the next one.
It's in bold.
Yep. Last item is the title. So Mr. Duffy had proposed resolution petitioning state legislature to modify the fair funding formula to adequately fund districts facing charter school and mayoral academy expansion. So you could combine this, state legislature to modify the funding formula, etc., to adequately fund districts facing and place a moratorium on charter and mayoral academy expansion. Okay.
Sorry, Madam Chair, one more time, please.
A resolution petitioning the state legislature, I can't remember if it says that, I'm wrong, to modify the fair funding formula to adequately fund districts and to place a moratorium on charter school and mayoral academy expansion. All right, so. Districts facing charter school and mayoral academy expansion. Oh, I'm sorry. To modify the adequately funded. I think what I had said was to adequately fund, and I would say, and place a moratorium on charter and mayoral academy expansion. Sorry. On that expansion.
It's not permanent. Like, once they fix it.
Right, that's that. Yep. All right. So any other changes or suggestions that we need to discuss this one? So what we would need to do is, should the committee decide, we would vote on the amendments, and then we would vote to approve the resolution. That's how this would work. And Mr. Duffy, I don't know if you have an interest in voting on part of it. And, okay.
We're going to have to go line by line through it. Again, I'm with you on all the facts in the middle. It's just the tone, and that one word changed the tone. So, no, I don't think we need to do that. Okay, thank you.
Are folks comfortable with voting in the amendments this evening? Oh, sure. Want to take a few minutes?
Yeah.
Okay. Take a 5-minute leave break. Just let me know when you think you're ready.
basketball.
Unfortunately, they lost by about 20 points.
It's at the end, too. It's at much on the school. Or people to what people All right.
Are we ready? Sure.
State share of the Fairfield.
Yep, why here? I think they were in the room. Well, stage day was. I don't think the chair is.
Sure. So we have finished our editing. I think this was a productive discussion, and I appreciate the candor and the respect for one another, because it certainly can be challenging. So what we have before us is a resolution
If the committee so chose this evening, it would have to, if it wanted to take action, it could approve the resolution, approve the amendments and then approve the resolution. So I will ask the pleasure of the committee on this action.
Madam Chair,
Mr. Salvatore.
I would like to move passage to accept as modified and written by Mr. Denon, the SCR 2015-05 document.
Thank you, Mr. Salvatore.
For the amendments, yes.
To approve the amendments made to SCR 2 2015-05. Do I have a second? Second by Mrs. Teal. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Those opposed? That carries 6-1. And then the next item would be to approve the resolution as amended. Pleasure of the committee. Mr. Salvatore.
I'd like to move passage to approve the recommendation as amended.
Of SCR 2 2015-05. Thank you. Do I have a second? Second by Mrs. Teal. Any further discussion?
I have a question.
Mr. Denon.
Is there value in holding on this and making it public until our next meeting before we approve it or not approve it?
That's up to the committee.
I think there is value. I may be the only one.
I would support that. I had some reservations initially, but I spent the last hour and a half rewording this. But it might be good just to digest it. It's so very close.
So does the majority wish to post it?
I'm not here in 2 weeks, but I'm not supportive in any way, so then it would just become unanimous the way it sounds tonight. So it won't make a difference to me, right? Because I won't be there. I'm okay. I don't need to take the vote to be against it just for the sake of being against it. I just wanted my voice heard, that I just wanted a different tone. I don't need a no vote just for the sake of having a no vote. So I'm okay if you guys do it when I'm not here at this point. I've said everything I needed to say about it.
I would say Mr. Denning is comfortable now. I'd say let's vote now so that he's made.
Okay. Okay. So we have a motion and we have a second. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor? Those opposed? That motion carries 6-1 with Mr. Duffy dissenting. Thank you all for the work. I greatly appreciate the patience and the fortitude, and to Mr. Denon for making an outstanding work. Right, Mrs. Taylor? Yes. All right, thank you all for your patience. Next item on the agenda is discussion and/or vote to approve amended policies. So, Mr. Fiorello, we tabled? Oh, yeah. We did, that's right. So I think we did vote on them already. So I don't think we need to take any action here. We kind of jumped the gun a little bit.
Yes, I think
Absolutely.
we had tabled G6.
Correct. Terrific. All right, so that was easy. And I think Mrs. Fogel, you're up next with personnel recommendations.
So Cindy had mentioned that for some reason it looks like it was only uploaded this morning, but they were uploaded Friday. I think it may have been an issue with the folder, but I just wanted you to know that all personnel recommendations. I did just add one, which I'll explain to you in a minute. So I request the advice and consent of the school committee on the following leaves of absences. Tanya Cobb, elementary teacher at Cumberland Hill Elementary School, effective May 22nd, 2015 for the remainder of the school year. Nicole O'Connor, school psychologist for the Cumberland School Department, from March 26, 2015 through the remainder of the school year. And Jillian Smith, school counselor at BF Norton Elementary School, from April 27, 2015 through the
Pleasure of the committee. Mr. Fiorello.
I'd just like to say that Jillian Smith is a valued member of the BF community, and she will be sorely missed these last few months.
We've been working diligently to get we have interviews scheduled for this week so that we will be well prepared. And there'll be some shadowing time, so I anticipate hopefully no issues.
Thank you. Mr. Fiorello, would you like to move passage?
I will pass it on the absences.
Thank you. Do I have a second? Second by Mr. Dunn and Mrs. Teal. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Those opposed? That motion carries 7-0.
Then lastly, I have for you, last time I came and brought you the spring coaches, we had some to be determined because we were still in the process of interviewing and hiring. So I have some spring coaches for you. One that I just uploaded during, and I'm sorry that I left, but I got an email from the athletic director that someone had accepted, so I wanted to get it on because the season starts March 9th, and we obviously don't meet again until March 12th, so I'm sorry about the lateness. So I request the advice and consent of the school committee on the following appointments for coaching positions for the spring season. Christine Brown, girls head softball coach at Joseph L. McCourt Middle School. Michael Forrest, boys head JV baseball coach, at Cumberland High School. Brian Lawrence, JV lacrosse coach at Cumberland High School. And Brad Yankee, middle school baseball coach at Joseph L. McCourt Middle School.
Yankee baseball coach.
I'll pass it.
Would it be separately?
Mr. Fiorello moves passage of the spring coaches. Do I have a second? Second by Mr. Denon. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Madam Chair,
Mr. Fiorello. Mr. Demonica, sorry.
I'm going to be voting no on all these recommendations. No disrespect to any of these coaches, but at 3:30 this afternoon and at 9:14 p.m. tonight, this folder's updated. We've talked about this in the past about giving us some time to look at these recommendations. I'm going to vote no at this time.
If I could just note, I don't know why it says 3:30. Cindy came to me this afternoon to say that for some reason it was showing, those were uploaded on, I'm sorry, I said Friday, but I meant Monday afternoon, like our usual protocol. I did just load Mr. Yankees as you were speaking because I got an email from Mr. Tajan, and I indicated to him that I was in the middle of school committee and I didn't know what would happen. And Dr. Thornton and I texted, and he said that I should at least put it on and bring it before you because the season does start on March 9th. So I apologize for that one, but the other ones were uploaded.
So they were uploaded. They were in the drive.
They were supposed to be. So, but apparently Cindy came in to see me this afternoon to say for some reason that the drive was showing that it was just uploaded this afternoon. She doesn't know why.
And what was the time? 3:30?
3:30 this
I'm trying
afternoon.
to think of the time that I looked at them today. I would have to say as well, because I had back-to-back meetings from 3 to 5 o'clock. So I just, based on my recollection, I do believe that they were in the drive, except for
the one I did just, and that's why I wanted to let you know that was why I left quick to go upload the documents for you. But I do understand Mr. DeMonica's issue, but I just wanted to let you know that I'm not sure why it's showing 3:30, unless she went in and did some, maybe moved them around or something, and then it's showing updated as of that date. I don't know, because I'm not a Google expert.
I appreciate that. And thank you very much. So we have a motion and we have a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Those opposed? Okay, so that's 5-2. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. School committee comments, school liaison reports. No? Hearing none. Dr. Thornton, do we have executive sessions?
We do not.
Thank you.
Motion to adjourn.
Thank you, Mr. Fiorello. Do I have a second? Second by Mr. Denon and Mr. Salvatore. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Those opposed? And that motion carries 7-0, and we are adjourned at 9:51. Thank you.